One Piece chapter 1035 is out, and we are wrapping things up a lot faster than I thought we would. The cover story this week is the start of a new series, which it looks like it's going to cover the escapes from Whole Cake Island. The starting one is for Germa, and we're probably going to get a few chapters with Germa as the cover and then bounce around to maybe some other things. I'm imagining this is how we're going to figure out what happened to the Fishman pirates and how Jinbei was able to get to Wano. We start the chapter right where we left off, and that's with Sanji and Queen. And let me tell you, I was very surprised to see this, but Sanji has officially taken the dub on Queen. I thought it was going to take a lot longer for this to go through, but nope. That last kick of his was all he needed, and that kick was really strong. It sent Queen flying out of the dome and off the island. I'm assuming he's going to land somewhere in Wano because they're already really close. And I think once people start to realize what's happening, they're going to see Queen defeated and they're going to realize that someone's fighting. And of course, being the kind person Sanji is, he goes and finds the mouse that was kind of moving around last chapter, and he gives it to the geisha that Queen had been attacking. And it's a very wholesome scene, but at the end, Sanji ends up passing out, which kind of surprised me because we have this advanced region now. So I'm wondering if there's a certain limitation that Sanji's body has, because maybe it wasn't perfect like the rest of Germa. Maybe he can only do so much because not only has his regeneration not really kicked in, but he took like physical damage, which his body is supposed to be pretty resistant to. And although Queen is a very strong opponent, I think a lot of that should have been mitigated. But the fight is officially over and Sanji is the victor. And then we jump to the focus of the chapter, which is Zoro and King, and how this fight's going to play out. Now the first thing we see is Zoro landing a hit on King. And this tells us that off screen, Zoro was able to deduce what the connection was between King's flames and his durability. Basically, when King has the flames on him or they have them visible or in use, that's when he's pretty much invulnerable to attacks. But when he shuts them off to enhance his speed and probably some other aspects, he becomes more vulnerable. The last attack from Zoro damages King's mask so much that he ends up just taking it off. And when he does, the fodder look at him and confirm rumors that he is in fact a Lunarian, or that basically he's got the features of a Lunarian. Those features being black wings, white hair, tan skin. Now the odd thing is, this seems like less of a secret than it should have been, because the Lunarians, who were heralded as gods and were pretty much eradicated, seem to be a very mysterious race. But the fact that the government has basically bounties and rewards for information on them, it makes it a little less mysterious, because obviously the government knows King still exists, or like Lunarians still exist, and they're like openly reaching out for information for them. Now, based on Big Mom's news network, King is the last of his kind. And it makes sense that they know King still is out there because he escaped with Kaido. So it's not exactly surprising. I would say it does make sense in the story, it just takes away a little bit of that mystery. King overhears the fodder talking and gets rid of them with one of his flame abilities. And this whole scene, and a lot of scenes actually in this chapter, seem to serve as parallels. This scene here reminds me a lot of Katakuri, where basically the chefs were talking about his mouth and he ended up taking them out with no hesitation. This scene has a lot of that same energy where the first hand of whoever they're working with, you have Big Mom, you have Kaido here, and they're the first hands, react in a very strong way, but a very, no hesitation, no mercy kind of way. And when you look at the bigger scope of the fight, you have a situation in which Zoro is trying to fight this person which he doesn't know the weakness of. And this is pretty much making this person seem invincible up until the point where he finds that weakness. And then they become not easy to defeat, but the goal is within reach. And that's the same thing that happened with Luffy and Katakuri, where Luffy really didn't know how to handle Katakuri's observation haki. He didn't know how to handle his future sight. He had to learn what the trick was and then play around it. Zoro and King clashed a few more times with some ineffective attacks, and Zoro mentions that Enma's basically taking his life away. He's running on limited time here, so he's got to end this fight fast. And I think one of the things that he doesn't mention, and this is probably because he's not super cognizant of it, but the medication he took is also going to have an effect pretty soon. Once this fight ends, it's probably all going to pile on Zoro at once. We get some dialogue that leads to King's backstory, which is actually very interesting. Now, it doesn't really have a whole lot to do with Lunarians, but just the connection between Kaido and King. At some point, likely when they eradicated the rest of the Lunarians, King was taken in as something to experiment on, basically a guinea pig. At the same time, Kaido is being experimented on. And we know that Vegapunk used Kaido's lineage factor to make the artificial devil fruit and how that whole sequence goes. But this looks to be the time when Kaido was being experimented on. We can see that Kaido has, chains and shackles on his arms that he's obviously broken out of, and he's basically breaking free. The entire area looks like a lab, very similar to something that Vegapunk would have. Kaido basically tells King that they're not going to let King go. They're not going to let a Lunarian be free, so he should join Kaido's side. He should escape with Kaido and be his right hand. And this whole sequence, again a parallel, reminds me of Luffy and Zoro, where Luffy basically finds Zoro and says, I can set you free, but you gotta join my crew. And initially there's some hesitation, but that's how they start. That's how that whole thing starts. And even just the way Kaido is acting here is so different than what I expect, because he seems like such a bright visionary, even in the situation where he's just been experimented on, he's just been captured, and he's breaking free. There's something about him that reminds me of Luffy and Roger, where they just kind of have this bright exposition of themselves. They're just very optimistic about something, and you can see it in their face. They end up escaping together, and it's actually Kaido who gives King his name, which is fitting because we know Kaido has the entire card theme to his crew, so he starts it off with King. And based on this backstory alone, I get the feeling that King has deep admiration and respect for Kaido. Not saying that the other people don't, but a lot of people that follow Kaido do it out of fear. You can tell that King is doing it out of respect, and when he says that Kaido will be king of pirates, he's doing it because he believes in Kaido. And this makes me wonder about the other Tobirabo, because we know that Kaido found Ulti and Page 1 and pretty much brought them under his wing. We don't know too much about Queen, Sasaki, and Who's Who, but basically the way they all come together, it seems like these ones in particular, and probably the higher ups, respect Kaido. And I think there's a good reason for that. We jump back to the fight and we get a few more clashes. Zoro throws an attack that doesn't land, doesn't do anything, and then King throws an attack that Zoro remarks burns as hot as lava, and he dodges this. Now, I kind of expected him to be cutting through it, which he ends up doing later on, but I was just surprised that he dodged this one instead of cutting it. They clash swords again, and King tries to do the same trick with his sword where he disarms Zoro. Now, before he can get this off, it looks like Zoro manages to launch a blast of Conqueror's Haki over his swords. Now, the way it looks and the way it's portrayed, I think this is supposed to be that Haki clash between, the big dogs, what Whitebeard and Roger did, what Luffy and Kaido are doing. The big difference being that I don't believe King is using Conqueror's Haki. I think this is purely Zoro. And I say that because in this clash, you can see that King is being pushed back. He was coming from a downward strike on Zoro, but in the panel where the Haki is unleashed, you can see his hair is falling in front of him, you can see his wings have changed shape, that he's being pushed away from Zoro. So I think instead of a clash of Haki, it was more of a burst of Haki. They both recover from the clash, and King goes into speed mode. Basically, he stops using his flames, becomes a lot faster, and he, again, does something very similar to Katakuri, where he lands a kick in Zoro's face, basically moving faster than Zoro can really react to it. Now, Zoro eats the kick, but he also counters with a cut of his own that does damage because King was in speed mode, didn't have the flames or the invulnerability. At this point, King has acknowledged that Zoro understands how his body functions, he knows the secret now, so the tactics of fighting have changed. King actually takes a safer stance by flying and launching an attack from the air, which makes a lot of sense because Zoro really can't do a whole lot in the air, so King attacking up here pretty much is a win for him because he has the range, he has the coverage, and he has mobility. So King flies up and launches a massive flame dragon at Zoro. And in what I was expecting him to do earlier, he of course cuts through this flame dragon. Now he doesn't just cut through it, but he launches a flying slash that looks to be infused with Conqueror's Haki, and that cuts through it and reaches all the way to King. Now, not only does this kind of fulfill the whole theory that Zoro's going to cut a dragon, will this be the only one? I have no idea. Will he cut more dragons, different kinds of dragons? It's hard to tell at this point. I've never been subscribed to Zoro killing Kaido, but we don't know if they're going to have another interaction where maybe he cuts him again. But it is very interesting that the type of dragon made through King's flames looks like Kaido. It looks like the kind of the Eastern dragon. And this attack doesn't just hit King, but it looks like it takes off part of his wing. We see the Haki splash emanate from his body where it lands. Just like Sanji, this seems to be a really strong strike. And very similar to how Queen was basically done in the next chapter, I think we're going to see the last bits of King in the following chapter to this. Very good chapter overall. I really enjoyed the backstory. I think that was probably my favorite part of the chapter, was just seeing Kaido, seeing King get together, seeing that kind of comparison, that parallel to Luffy and Zoro. I definitely enjoyed that. And for those who might not see it, go back and look at the interaction between Luffy and Katakuri and the meetup between Zoro and Luffy. They really match up what's happening here, and I think that's supposed to be intentional in some ways. But now that we've gotten the commanders out of the way, basically we have Kaido and Big Mom left. So I think the next parts of the chapters we're going to get are going to be focused on either Big Mom getting attacked and getting out of here, or however they're going to conclude the Big Mom portion of Wano. I think we're still going to save Kaido for a bit longer. We still got a little bit to go here, but we're definitely getting close to the end game. Please tell me what you guys thought down below. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and I will catch you on the next one. Bye.